Dr. Elena Rodriguez collapsed in the cardiac wing of St. Catherine's Medical Center at exactly 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, her heart stopping for nearly 4 minutes, while 3 floors above, her family toasted her sister Carmen's promotion to Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery in the very same hospital. What they didn't know was that Elena owned 43% of the private medical facility through a trust her late mentor had established, making her not just a patient fighting for her life, but the primary stakeholder in the institution where her family had gathered to celebrate everything she supposedly wasn't. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena had always been the family disappointment, a fact that became glaringly obvious every time the Rodriguez clan gathered for their monthly dinners at her parents' sprawling estate in Pacific Heights. While her older sister Carmen had sailed through medical school at Harvard and secured a prestigious residency in cardiovascular surgery, Elena had taken what her family considered the scenic route through life. She had started in pre-med, switched to public health, then spent 2 years teaching English in rural Guatemala before finally settling on emergency medicine at a state school that her father, Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, barely acknowledged as a real medical institution. The Rodriguez family had built their reputation on excellence, precision, and an unwavering commitment to being the best in their respective fields. Miguel was a renowned neurologist whose research on traumatic brain injuries had earned him international recognition. Elena's mother, Isabella, had been a successful pharmaceutical executive before retiring to manage the family's various charitable foundations. Carmen had followed perfectly in their footsteps, specializing in the most prestigious and lucrative field of medicine while maintaining the kind of polished professionalism that opened doors and generated respect. Then there was Elena, who chose emergency medicine because she wanted to help people in their most vulnerable moments, regardless of their insurance status or ability to pay. She worked long shifts at county hospitals, dealing with overdoses, domestic violence cases, and psychiatric emergencies that her family viewed as beneath their social standing. Her hair was perpetually pulled back in a messy bun, her scrubs were often stained with coffee or worse, and she drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic that embarrassed her mother every time she parked it in their circular driveway next to Carmen's gleaming BMW and their parents' matching Mercedes vehicles. During family gatherings, Elena would sit quietly while Carmen regaled everyone with stories of complex surgeries, groundbreaking procedures, and the wealthy patients who specifically requested her expertise. Their parents would beam with pride, asking detailed questions about Carmen's latest publications in medical journals and her speaking engagements at international conferences. When conversation turned to Elena, the topics invariably focused on when she might consider a more respectable specialty, whether she was dating anyone with appropriate credentials, or gentle suggestions about improving her appearance to better represent the family name. Elena's refuge had always been Dr. Margaret Chen, an elderly physician who had founded St. Catherine's Medical Center 30 years earlier as a nonprofit institution dedicated to providing quality care regardless of patients' financial circumstances. Margaret had been Elena's attending physician during her residency and had quickly recognized something special in the young doctor's approach to patient care. While other residents focused on impressive diagnoses and complex procedures, Elena consistently demonstrated an intuitive understanding of human suffering that couldn't be taught in medical school. Margaret had taken Elena under her wing, not as a protege in the traditional sense, but as someone who shared her vision of medicine as a calling rather than merely a career. They would have long conversations during quiet moments in the emergency department, discussing not just medical cases, but the philosophical foundations of healing, the responsibility physicians bore to serve all members of society, and the ways that modern medicine had lost touch with its humanitarian roots. When Margaret was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 18 months earlier, she had asked Elena to help her organize her affairs. What Elena discovered was that Margaret had built an impressive portfolio of investments and properties over her decades of practice, all carefully managed to support her vision of accessible healthcare. The most significant asset was St. Catherine's Medical Center itself, which Margaret had gradually purchased from its original corporate owners through a complex series of financial maneuvers that had taken nearly 2 decades to complete. The process of helping Margaret navigate her final months had been both heartbreaking and illuminating for Elena. She learned about the business side of healthcare that medical school had never addressed, understanding how Margaret had managed to maintain St. Catherine's as a truly nonprofit institution while still ensuring its financial sustainability. Margaret shared her frustrations with the corporatization of medicine, her concerns about the future of community-focused healthcare, and her hopes that someone would continue her mission after she was gone. 2 weeks before Margaret's death, she had called Elena to her home office for what would be their final serious conversation. The older physician looked frail but determined as she handed Elena a thick manila envelope containing legal documents that would change everything about how Elena understood her place in the world. Margaret had restructured the ownership of St. Catherine's Medical Center, creating a complex trust that would transfer control of the facility to Elena upon Margaret's death. The arrangement was designed to protect the hospital's nonprofit mission while giving Elena the authority to make decisions about its future direction. Along with the hospital, Elena would inherit Margaret's investment portfolio, her real estate holdings, and the responsibility for maintaining the institution's commitment to serving underserved populations. Elena had protested that she wasn't qualified to run a hospital, that she was just an emergency physician without business training or administrative experience. Margaret had smiled and reminded her that the most important qualification for healthcare leadership wasn't an MBA, but a genuine commitment to healing. She had surrounded Elena with a team of experienced administrators and financial advisors who shared their vision, ensuring that Elena would have support while she grew into her new role. The legal documents were structured to keep Elena's ownership private for as long as she chose, allowing her to continue working as an emergency physician while gradually learning the complexities of hospital administration. Margaret's attorney, James Park, had explained that the arrangement included provisions for Elena to maintain her anonymity, with all official communications going through the law firm and Elena's identity as the primary stakeholder remaining confidential. For the past 6 months since Margaret's death, Elena had been living a double life that she found both exhilarating and exhausting. During her shifts in the emergency department, she was simply Dr. Rodriguez, the dedicated but unremarkable physician who worked nights and weekends while her colleagues pursued more glamorous career paths. But in conference rooms and board meetings that she attended using video calls from her apartment, she was the primary decision-maker for a medical facility that employed over 800 people and served thousands of patients each year. Her family remained completely unaware of this transformation in Elena's circumstances. They continued to view her as the disappointing daughter who had settled for a less prestigious medical specialty, who lived in a modest apartment instead of buying property in an exclusive neighborhood, who drove an old car and wore the same scrubs to work every day. Elena had maintained this perception partly out of habit and partly out of uncertainty about how her family would react to learning about her hidden responsibilities and resources. The irony of the situation became increasingly apparent as Elena watched Carmen's career trajectory intersect with St. Catherine's Medical Center. Carmen had been recruited by the hospital's previous administration as part of their effort to expand their cardiac surgery program, bringing her prestigious credentials and impressive patient outcomes to enhance the facility's reputation. What Carmen didn't know was that Elena had been involved in approving her hiring, reviewing her credentials through the same confidential process that protected Elena's identity as the hospital's primary stakeholder. Elena found herself in the strange position of indirectly employing her older sister while maintaining the family fiction that Carmen was the successful one with the important career. During family dinners, she would listen to Carmen describe her work at St. Catherine's, discussing the hospital's policies and procedures, its financial challenges and strategic priorities, never realizing that Elena was intimately familiar with all of these details from a completely different perspective. The family dynamics became even more complex when Carmen was nominated for promotion to Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery, a position that would make her one of the most senior physicians at St. Catherine's and significantly increase her influence over the hospital's direction. Elena participated in the confidential review process for Carmen's promotion, working with other board members and administrators to evaluate her qualifications and suitability for the leadership role. It was a surreal experience, reviewing her sister's professional accomplishments while knowing that Carmen viewed Elena as a family disappointment who had failed to achieve anything comparable. Elena's secret became increasingly difficult to maintain as Carmen's promotion moved through the approval process. Her sister began mentioning specific hospital policies and administrative decisions that Elena had been directly involved in making, describing conversations with senior leadership that Elena had participated in through confidential channels. The cognitive dissonance of hearing Carmen discuss Elena's own decisions as examples of effective hospital management while simultaneously dismissing Elena's career as unremarkable created a constant undercurrent of tension that Elena struggled to manage. The announcement of Carmen's promotion was scheduled to coincide with the hospital's annual gala, a fundraising event that Elena had helped plan through her role as the primary stakeholder. The gala was designed to celebrate St. Catherine's mission of community service while raising money for expanded programs serving uninsured and underinsured patients. Elena had specifically requested that the event highlight the hospital's commitment to providing care regardless of patients' ability to pay, honoring Margaret's vision while ensuring the institution's financial sustainability. Carmen's family had planned a private celebration dinner at St. Catherine's to commemorate her promotion, arranging to use one of the hospital's executive conference rooms for an intimate gathering with their parents and extended family members. Elena had been invited to the celebration, though the invitation carried the familiar undertone of obligation rather than genuine enthusiasm for her presence. Her mother had specifically mentioned that Elena should try to dress appropriately for the occasion, suggesting that her usual casual attire might not be suitable for celebrating Carmen's professional achievement. As the date of the celebration approached, Elena found herself caught between conflicting emotions about her family's gathering at the hospital she secretly owned. Part of her wanted to maintain the status quo, allowing Carmen to have her moment of triumph without complicating the situation with revelations about Elena's hidden role in the institution. Another part of her felt increasingly frustrated with the family narrative that portrayed her as unsuccessful and unremarkable, while her sister celebrated achievements at the very facility Elena was responsible for maintaining and improving. The tension Elena was experiencing manifested in physical symptoms that she initially dismissed as stress related to her demanding work schedule. She had been pulling extra shifts in the emergency department while also managing her responsibilities as the hospital's primary stakeholder, often working 16-hour days that left her exhausted and depleted. Her appetite decreased, her sleep became irregular, and she began experiencing occasional chest tightness that she attributed to anxiety about the upcoming family celebration. Elena's colleague and friend, Dr. Sarah Kim, had noticed the changes in Elena's behavior and appearance over the preceding weeks. Sarah worked alongside Elena in the emergency department and had observed her becoming increasingly withdrawn and tired, though Elena deflected any expressions of concern with humor and reassurances that she was simply busy with various projects. Sarah had suggested that Elena take some time off, noting that even dedicated physicians needed to prioritize their own health and well-being. The night before Carmen's celebration dinner, Elena had worked a particularly challenging shift in the emergency department. The hospital had experienced an unusual influx of critical cases, including a multi-vehicle accident that had brought in 7 patients with various degrees of trauma. Elena had coordinated the emergency response, working seamlessly with nurses, specialists, and support staff to ensure that each patient received appropriate care. The shift had been exactly the kind of experience that had drawn her to emergency medicine, allowing her to use her skills and training to make a real difference in people's lives during their most vulnerable moments. As Elena prepared to leave the hospital after her shift, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction about the work she had accomplished. Despite her family's perception of her career as less prestigious than Carmen's surgical specialty, Elena knew that she was exactly where she belonged, doing work that mattered in ways that couldn't be measured by salary or social status. She was also acutely aware that she had played a crucial role in ensuring that St. Catherine's Medical Center could continue providing the kind of comprehensive emergency care that had saved lives that night. The following evening, as Elena prepared for Carmen's celebration dinner, she found herself struggling with the same feelings of displacement that had characterized her relationship with her family for years. She chose her outfit carefully, selecting a conservative dress that would meet her mother's standards while reflecting her own sense of personal style. As she looked at herself in the mirror, Elena realized that she was preparing to attend a celebration of her sister's success at the hospital Elena secretly owned, maintaining a facade of family harmony while hiding the most significant achievement of her own life. Elena arrived at Catherine's Medical Center that evening as a guest rather than as the primary stakeholder, parking her modest Honda Civic in the visitor lot rather than using the executive parking space that was technically hers. She walked through the lobby she had helped redesign, past artwork she had personally selected, toward the conference room where her family had gathered to celebrate Carmen's promotion to a position Elena had helped approve. The surreal nature of the situation struck her as she moved through spaces she knew intimately from a completely different perspective. The conference room had been beautifully arranged for the intimate family celebration, with elegant catering and floral arrangements that reflected the significance of Carmen's achievement. Elena's parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins had gathered to honor Carmen's promotion, their conversations filled with pride and admiration for her professional accomplishments. Elena took her usual place at the periphery of the family group, offering congratulations to Carmen while maintaining the emotional distance that had become her default mode during family gatherings. As the evening progressed, Elena listened to speeches praising Carmen's dedication, skill, and leadership potential. Her father spoke eloquently about Carmen's achievements, describing her promotion as the natural result of years of hard work and commitment to excellence. Her mother shared anecdotes about Carmen's childhood determination and academic success, painting a picture of inevitable success that had always been Carmen's destiny. Extended family members offered toasts and congratulations, celebrating Carmen as a source of pride and inspiration for the entire Rodriguez family. Elena participated in the celebration with genuine happiness for her sister's achievement, understanding that Carmen had earned her promotion through years of dedicated work and exceptional patient care. At the same time, she felt the familiar ache of invisibility that characterized her experience as the family disappointment. No one asked about Elena's work or acknowledged her contributions to medicine, even though they were celebrating in a facility where Elena's decisions directly impacted thousands of patients and hundreds of employees. The contrast between Elena's public persona and her private reality became increasingly difficult to maintain as the evening continued. She found herself experiencing chest tightness and shortness of breath that she initially attributed to anxiety about the social situation. However, as the symptoms intensified, Elena began to recognize that she might be experiencing something more serious than stress-related discomfort. Her medical training allowed her to identify early warning signs of cardiac distress, but her emotional state made it difficult to trust her own clinical judgment. Elena excused herself from the celebration, telling her family that she needed to check on something work-related in another part of the hospital. Her excuse was readily accepted, reinforcing the family perception that Elena's job was less important than the occasion they were celebrating. As she left the conference room, Elena felt a crushing combination of physical pain and emotional isolation that seemed to overwhelm her ability to think clearly about her situation. She made her way toward the emergency department, intending to have a colleague evaluate her symptoms and determine whether she needed immediate medical attention. However, as she walked through the familiar corridors of St. Catherine's Medical Center, Elena's condition deteriorated rapidly. The chest pain intensified, her breathing became labored, and she began experiencing the kind of acute distress that she had seen countless times in patients but had never experienced herself. Elena's last clear memory before losing consciousness was the realization that she was having a heart attack in the hospital she owned, while her family celebrated her sister's success just floors away. The irony of the situation struck her even as her medical training kicked in, allowing her to recognize the severity of her condition and understand that she needed immediate intervention to survive. As darkness closed around her, Elena wondered whether her family would even notice her absence from Carmen's celebration, or whether they would continue toasting her sister's achievements while Elena fought for her life in the cardiac wing below. The code blue alarm echoed through St. Catherine's Medical Center at 11:47 p.m., summoning the cardiac arrest team to the third-floor corridor where Dr. Elena Rodriguez had collapsed. The team of nurses, residents, and attending physicians who responded to the emergency had no way of knowing that they were working to save the life of the person who ultimately controlled their institution's destiny. To them, Elena was simply a colleague in crisis, a fellow physician who needed their expertise and dedication to survive the next critical hours. Dr. James Morrison, the attending cardiologist who led Elena's resuscitation, would later describe those first minutes as some of the most challenging of his career. Elena's heart had stopped completely, requiring immediate CPR and defibrillation to restore any kind of cardiac rhythm. The team worked with the kind of focused intensity that characterizes emergency medicine at its best, using every available resource to stabilize Elena's condition and transport her to the cardiac catheterization lab for emergency intervention. As Elena was rushed into surgery, 3 floors above her continued their celebration of Carmen's promotion, completely unaware that the family member they had always considered least successful was fighting for her life in the very hospital where they were toasting Carmen's achievements. The contrast between Elena's struggle for survival and her family's joyful celebration would become the defining moment that forced everyone to confront the reality of who Elena really was and what she had accomplished while hiding in plain sight. The fluorescent lights of the cardiac intensive care unit cast harsh shadows across Elena's unconscious face as machines monitored every aspect of her fragile condition. Dr. Morrison had successfully opened the blocked artery that had caused Elena's massive heart attack, but her prognosis remained uncertain. The damage to her heart muscle was extensive, and her body was struggling to maintain the basic functions necessary for survival. Nurses moved quietly around her bed, adjusting medications and recording vital signs that fluctuated unpredictably despite their best efforts to stabilize her condition. Elena's surgery had taken place during the same hours that her family finished their celebration upstairs. Carmen had given a gracious speech accepting congratulations from relatives who praised her dedication and vision for the cardiac surgery department. Miguel and Isabella had basked in the reflected glory of their eldest daughter's achievement, discussing Carmen's future prospects with the kind of pride that had always eluded their conversations about Elena. The gathering had concluded with champagne toasts and promises to celebrate again once Carmen officially assumed her new leadership position. It wasn't until nearly midnight that anyone in the Rodriguez family realized Elena was missing from the celebration.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Isabella had noticed her younger daughter's empty chair during the final toast, but assumed Elena had stepped away to take a phone call or handle some minor work issue. The family's perception of Elena as perpetually busy with trivial matters made her absence seem unremarkable rather than concerning. Carmen had suggested they wait a few more minutes before leaving, thinking Elena might return to say goodbye, but eventually decided that Elena had probably left early without bothering to interrupt the festivities. The family departed St. Catherine's Medical Center in high spirits, planning future celebrations and discussing Carmen's transition into her new role. They drove home through quiet streets, unaware that Elena lay unconscious just floors below where they had been celebrating, fighting for her life with the support of machines and medications that were keeping her heart beating. The irony of their ignorance would become painfully apparent in the hours that followed, when Elena's true relationship to the hospital would be revealed in ways none of them could have anticipated. Dr. Sarah Kim had been working the night shift in the emergency department when she heard about Elena's collapse through the hospital's internal communication system. The news that a colleague had suffered a major cardiac event sent shockwaves through the staff, particularly those who worked closely with Elena and knew her as a healthy, dedicated physician. Sarah immediately requested updates on Elena's condition and asked to be notified of any changes in her status, understanding that Elena had no immediate family members at the hospital to advocate for her care. The cardiac team treating Elena faced significant challenges during her first critical hours. Her heart rhythm remained unstable despite medication adjustments, and her kidney function showed signs of stress from the prolonged period with adequate circulation. Dr. Morrison consulted with colleagues about the possibility of mechanical circulatory support, recognizing that Elena's recovery would require aggressive intervention and careful monitoring. The team worked with the kind of dedication that characterized St. Catherine's approach to patient care, drawing on resources and expertise that Elena had helped ensure would be available for situations exactly like this one. As dawn approached, Elena's condition showed marginal improvement, though she remained unconscious and dependent on life support systems. Her heart rhythm had stabilized somewhat, and her other organ functions were slowly responding to treatment. Dr. Morrison cautiously optimistic about her prospects for survival, though he warned the nursing staff that Elena's recovery would likely be prolonged and complicated. The next several days would be critical in determining whether she would survive and what level of function she might ultimately recover. Elena's absence from her scheduled shifts prompted administrative staff to contact her emergency contacts, beginning with the phone number she had listed for her parents. Isabella received the call at 7 in the morning, initially confused about why the hospital was calling about Elena's work schedule. The conversation became increasingly alarming as the caller explained that Elena had suffered a medical emergency and was currently in the cardiac intensive care unit. Isabella's shock and disbelief gave way to panic as she processed the information that her daughter was fighting for her life. The Rodriguez family's response to news of Elena's condition revealed the complex dynamics that had shaped their relationships for decades. Miguel immediately shifted into his professional physician mode, calling Dr. Morrison directly to obtain detailed information about Elena's diagnosis and treatment plan. His medical knowledge allowed him to understand the severity of Elena's condition, but his emotional distance from his younger daughter made it difficult for him to process the implications of potentially losing her. Isabella became hysterical, alternating between guilt about not noticing Elena's absence and fear about her daughter's survival. Carmen's reaction was perhaps the most complicated, combining genuine concern for her sister with confusion about why Elena had been at the hospital during her celebration. She had assumed Elena left early because she felt uncomfortable at the family gathering, not because she was experiencing a medical emergency. The realization that Elena had been collapsing from a heart attack while Carmen accepted congratulations for her promotion created a profound sense of guilt and responsibility that would influence Carmen's perspective on their family relationships. The Rodriguez family arrived at St. Catherine's Medical Center that morning as frightened relatives rather than celebrants, their previous evening's joy completely overshadowed by fear for Elena's life. They gathered in the cardiac intensive care unit waiting room, a space Elena had helped design to provide comfort for families during their most difficult moments. The irony of their situation was lost on them, as they sat in chairs Elena had selected, surrounded by artwork she had approved, waiting for updates from physicians whose salaries she ultimately controlled. Dr. Morrison met with the family to explain Elena's condition and prognosis, providing the kind of compassionate but realistic assessment that Elena had always admired in her colleagues. He described the extensive damage to Elena's heart, the success of the emergency surgery, and the uncertain timeline for her recovery. The family listened with growing understanding of how close they had come to losing Elena, their previous dismissal of her importance suddenly seeming trivial compared to the possibility of her death. Elena's unconscious state provided an unexpected opportunity for her family to observe her in a context completely removed from their usual interactions. Lying in the cardiac intensive care unit, connected to machines that monitored every heartbeat, Elena appeared vulnerable in ways that contradicted their perception of her as perpetually busy with unimportant activities. The nurses who cared for Elena spoke about her with obvious respect and affection, describing her as a dedicated physician who consistently went above and beyond for her patients. Sarah Kim visited Elena regularly during her recovery, bringing updates from the emergency department and sharing stories about patients whose lives Elena had saved through her quick thinking and compassionate care. These conversations provided Elena's family with glimpses into aspects of her professional life they had never bothered to explore, revealing competence and dedication that challenged their assumptions about her career choices. Sarah's obvious regard for Elena as both a colleague and friend highlighted the meaningful relationships Elena had built outside her family circle.
The first sign of Elena's improving condition came 3 days after her heart attack, when she began showing responsive eye movements during neurological assessments. Dr. Morrison, cautiously optimistic about these developments, explaining to her family that Elena's brain function appeared intact despite the prolonged period of compromised circulation. The news brought tremendous relief to the Rodriguez family, who had been maintaining a vigil at Elena's bedside while grappling with their fear and guilt about potentially losing her. Elena's gradual return to consciousness occurred over several days, with periods of awareness alternating with confusion and exhaustion. Her first clear memory upon waking was the realization that she was a patient in the cardiac unit of her own hospital, being cared for by staff members whose employment she ultimately controlled. The surreal nature of her situation struck her immediately, though her physical weakness prevented her from fully processing the implications of what had happened during her medical emergency. The first conversation Elena had with her family after regaining consciousness was markedly different from their typical interactions. Miguel approached her bedside with tears in his eyes, expressing relief and gratitude that she had survived, while acknowledging how frightened he had been at the prospect of losing her. Isabella held Elena's hand gently, apologizing repeatedly for not noticing her distress during Carmen's celebration and expressing regret about their family's treatment of her over the years. Carmen stood quietly at the foot of the bed, struggling to articulate her complex feelings about the timing of Elena's collapse. Elena's recovery process provided unexpected opportunities for deeper family conversations that had been impossible during their previous superficial interactions. Her physical weakness forced periods of quiet rest that created space for meaningful dialogue, while her brush with death had shifted everyone's perspective on what truly mattered in their relationships. The Rodriguez family began sharing feelings and concerns they had previously kept hidden, gradually building foundations for more authentic connections. Dr. Morrison's discharge planning conversations revealed the extent of support Elena would need during her recovery, including cardiac rehabilitation, medication management, and significant lifestyle modifications. The family discussed arrangements for Elena's care with the assumption that she would need financial assistance for extended medical leave and ongoing treatment costs. Their conversations revealed their continued perception of Elena as financially vulnerable, despite her secret ownership of resources that dwarfed their own family wealth. Elena listened to these planning discussions with growing awareness that her recovery period would provide an opportunity to address the fundamental dishonesty that had characterized her relationships with her family. Her near-death experience had clarified her priorities in ways that made maintaining her secret seem less important than building genuine connections with the people she loved. The prospect of continuing to hide her true circumstances while accepting their financial assistance felt increasingly untenable. The administrative complexities of Elena's extended medical leave began to surface as hospital leadership addressed the implications of losing one of their most dedicated emergency physicians for an indefinite period. James Park, Margaret's former attorney, who served as Elena's legal representative, contacted her privately to discuss how her medical condition might affect her responsibilities as the hospital's primary stakeholder. Their conversation took place through secure communication channels that protected Elena's privacy while ensuring she remained informed about important institutional decisions. Elena's role in hospital governance had included recent discussions about expanding mental health services and implementing new programs to address physician burnout and stress management. The irony that she had been advocating for better support systems for healthcare workers while neglecting her own health was not lost on either Elena or James Park. Her medical crisis had demonstrated the urgent need for the very programs she had been working to develop, providing personal validation for initiatives she had supported from a policy perspective. The financial implications of Elena's medical leave presented complex challenges that required careful coordination between her public role as an employee and her private role as the hospital's owner. James Park worked with the hospital's Human Resources Department to ensure Elena received appropriate medical benefits while maintaining the confidentiality of her ownership status. The situation required delicate handling to avoid raising questions that might compromise Elena's privacy or create conflicts of interest. Elena's medical team included several specialists whose salaries she indirectly controlled through her ownership of the hospital, creating unusual dynamics that none of them were aware of during her treatment. Dr. Morrison's dedication to her care reflected the professional standards that Elena had worked to maintain throughout the institution, while the nursing staff's compassionate attention demonstrated the culture of patient-centered care that she had prioritized in her administrative decisions. Her experience as a patient provided valuable insights into the effectiveness of policies she had helped implement. Carmen's adjustment to her new role as Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery was complicated by guilt about Elena's medical crisis and growing awareness of how their family had treated her over the years. She found herself seeking opportunities to spend time with Elena during her recovery, gradually building a relationship that moved beyond their previous competitive dynamics. Carmen's medical expertise allowed her to understand the severity of her condition and appreciate the quality of care she was receiving from her colleagues. The revelation of Elena's extensive knowledge about St. Catherine's policies and procedures surprised her family members, who had assumed her work in the emergency department provided limited exposure to hospital administration. Elena's ability to discuss complex institutional issues with sophisticated understanding challenged their assumptions about her professional competence and involvement in healthcare beyond her direct patient care responsibilities. Her insights into hospital operations suggested levels of engagement they had never recognized or acknowledged. Elena's recovery progress allowed her to begin participating in video conferences related to her administrative responsibilities, though she maintained careful separation between these activities and her interactions with family members. The cognitive demands of hospital governance provided mental stimulation that aided her overall recovery while ensuring continuity in institutional leadership during her medical leave. James Park coordinated these arrangements to protect Elena's privacy while maintaining her involvement in critical decisions. The emotional processing of Elena's near-death experience prompted conversations about family relationships, professional priorities, and the meaning of success that had been impossible during their previous surface-level interactions. Elena found herself questioning whether maintaining her secret was serving anyone's best interests, particularly as her family began expressing genuine interest in understanding her perspective on healthcare and medicine. Their growing curiosity about her work created opportunities for more honest communication that Elena had long desired. Elena's physical therapy and cardiac rehabilitation took place within the same facility where she held ultimate administrative authority, creating daily reminders of the complexity of her situation. The cognitive demands of hospital governance provided mental stimulation that aided her overall recovery while ensuring continuity in institutional leadership during her medical leave. James Park coordinated these arrangements to protect Elena's privacy while maintaining her involvement in critical decisions. The emotional processing of Elena's near-death experience prompted conversations about family relationships, professional priorities, and the meaning of success that had been impossible during their previous surface-level interactions. Elena found herself questioning whether maintaining her secret was serving anyone's best interests, particularly as her family began expressing genuine interest in understanding her perspective on healthcare and medicine. Their growing curiosity about her work created opportunities for more honest communication that Elena had long desired. Elena's physical therapy and cardiac rehabilitation took place within the same facility where she held ultimate administrative authority, creating daily reminders of the complexity of her situation.
The staff members who worked with her during recovery were dedicated professionals whose commitment to patient care reflected the institutional values Elena had worked to promote through her leadership role. Her experience receiving care at St. Catherine's provided personal validation of the decisions she had made to prioritize patient welfare and employee satisfaction. The financial counseling sessions that were standard for cardiac patients revealed Elena's family's assumptions about her limited resources and their willingness to provide support for her recovery expenses. Isabella offered to cover Elena's medical costs and living expenses during her extended leave, while Miguel suggested she consider moving back to the family home to ensure adequate supervision during her recovery. Their genuine concern for her welfare conflicted with Elena's knowledge that she possessed resources far exceeding their ability to provide assistance. Elena's participation in support groups for cardiac patients provided perspectives on recovery that were both professionally and personally valuable. Her interactions with other patients revealed the challenges of navigating complex medical systems from a patient's perspective, highlighting areas where St. Catherine's policies could be improved to better serve vulnerable populations. These experiences informed her understanding of healthcare administration in ways that her previous professional training had not addressed. The gradual improvement in Elena's physical condition was accompanied by growing emotional clarity about her relationships and priorities. Her near-death experience had stripped away many of the psychological barriers that had prevented honest communication with her family, while her extended recovery period provided time for reflection that had been impossible during her demanding work schedule. Elena began developing plans for addressing the fundamental dishonesty in her family relationships, while maintaining her commitment to Margaret's vision for community-focused healthcare. Elena's return to limited physical activity included walks through the hospital corridors where she had collapsed, providing opportunities to observe the facility from a patient's perspective rather than as an administrator or physician. These experiences revealed both strengths and areas for improvement in the hospital's design and operations, informing her understanding of how policy decisions affected daily patient experiences. Her unique perspective as simultaneously owner, employee, and patient provided insights that would influence future institutional developments. The approaching date for Elena's potential return to work prompted discussions about modified duties and gradual reintegration into her emergency medicine practice. Dr. Morrison recommended extended cardiac rehabilitation and stress management as prerequisites for resuming her demanding clinical responsibilities, emphasizing the importance of lifestyle modifications to prevent future cardiac events. Elena's medical team was unaware that their recommendations would affect not only her direct patient care activities, but also her capacity to fulfill her administrative responsibilities as the hospital's primary stakeholder. Elena's family had begun making plans for ongoing support during her recovery, including arrangements for regular family dinners that would allow them to monitor her progress and provide emotional support. Their genuine commitment to helping Elena heal represented a significant departure from their previous superficial relationships, though their efforts were based on continued misunderstanding of her actual circumstances and resources. Elena recognized that accepting their assistance while maintaining her secret would perpetuate the dishonesty she was beginning to find intolerable. The complexity of Elena's situation reached a critical point as her recovery progressed and her family's involvement in her care deepened. Her growing strength and mental clarity made it increasingly difficult to justify maintaining the deception that had defined her relationships for months. At the same time, her near-death experience had clarified her priorities in ways that made authentic connections with her family seem more important than protecting her privacy or avoiding potential conflicts about her inheritance and responsibilities. Elena realized that her recovery from the heart attack would need to include emotional healing that addressed the fundamental problems in her family relationships. The dishonesty that had allowed her to hide her ownership of St. Catherine's Medical Center had also prevented genuine intimacy and understanding with the people she loved most. Her brush with death had demonstrated how quickly relationships could be lost, making the continuation of superficial connections seem like a waste of precious time and emotional energy. The decision about whether and how to reveal her secret began to dominate Elena's thoughts as her physical recovery progressed. She understood that disclosure would fundamentally change her family dynamics in ways that might be difficult to navigate, but she also recognized that maintaining her deception would prevent the authentic relationships she had come to value more highly than privacy or conflict avoidance. The approaching return to her normal activities would make maintaining her secret increasingly complicated and emotionally exhausting. Elena's conversations with James Park about her administrative responsibility during recovery had included discussions about the long-term sustainability of her dual role as emergency physician and hospital owner. Her medical crisis had highlighted the risks of maintaining such demanding responsibilities without adequate support systems or stress management strategies. The need to develop more sustainable approaches to her professional obligations became apparent as she considered her return to work and ongoing leadership responsibilities. The final stages of Elena's initial recovery period were marked by growing confidence in her physical abilities and increasing clarity about her emotional priorities. Her experience as a patient had deepened her understanding of healthcare from multiple perspectives while reinforcing her commitment to Margaret's vision of community-focused medicine. The time had come to address the fundamental dishonesty in her family relationships and begin building connections based on truth rather than the careful management of perceptions and expectations that had characterized their previous interactions. Elena's decision to reveal her ownership of St. Catherine's Medical Center came during a quiet evening in her hospital room 6 weeks after her heart attack, as Carmen sat beside her bed reviewing surgical schedules on her tablet. The routine nature of the moment made it feel like the right time for extraordinary honesty. Elena had been watching our sister navigate the complexities of her new leadership role, discussing budget constraints and staffing challenges that Elena knew intimately from her hidden administrative perspective. The cognitive dissonance of listening to Carmen worry about institutional decisions that Elena ultimately controlled had become unbearable. Carmen was explaining her frustration with the hospital's recent policy changes regarding surgical scheduling when Elena interrupted her mid-sentence. The words came out simply without the dramatic buildup Elena had rehearsed countless times in her mind. She told Carmen that she owned the hospital, that she had inherited it from Dr. Margaret Chen, and that she had been involved in every major decision Carmen had been discussing. The conversations with James Park about her administrative responsibility during recovery had included discussions about the long-term sustainability of her dual role as emergency physician and hospital owner.
Her medical crisis had highlighted the risks of maintaining such demanding responsibilities without adequate support systems or stress management strategies. The need to develop more sustainable approaches to her professional obligations became apparent as she considered her return to work and ongoing leadership responsibilities. The final stages of Elena's initial recovery period were marked by growing confidence in her physical abilities and increasing clarity about her emotional priorities. Her experience as a patient had deepened her understanding of healthcare from multiple perspectives, while reinforcing her commitment to Margaret's vision of community-focused Fokustan. The time had come to address the fundamental dishonesty in her family relationships and begin building connections based on truth rather than the careful management of perceptions and expectations that had characterized their previous interactions. Elena's decision to reveal her ownership of St. Catherine's Medical Center came during a quiet evening in her hospital room, 6 weeks after her heart attack, as Carmen sat beside her bed reviewing surgical schedules on her tablet. The routine nature of the moment made it feel like the right time for extraordinary honesty. Elena had been watching her sister navigate the complexities of her new leadership role, discussing budget constraints and staffing challenges that Elena knew intimately from her hidden administrative perspective. The cognitive dissonance of listening to Carmen worry about institutional decisions that Elena ultimately controlled had become unbearable. Carmen was explaining her frustration with the hospital's recent policy changes when Elena interrupted her mid-sentence. The words came out simply without the dramatic buildup Elena had rehearsed countless times in her mind. She told Carmen that she owned the hospital, that she had inherited it from Dr. Margaret Chen, and that she had been involved in every major decision Carmen had been discussing.
The silence that followed stretched between them like a chasm, Carmen's tablet forgotten in her lap as she stared at Elena with complete incomprehension. The first emotion that crossed Carmen's face was disbelief, followed quickly by confusion, then a dawning realization that began to recontextualize everything she thought she knew about her younger sister. Carmen's medical training kicked in as she processed this information with the same systematic approach she used for complex diagnoses. She asked Elena to explain the timeline, the legal mechanisms, the scope of her ownership, and the reasons for maintaining secrecy. Elena answered each question patiently, producing documents from her bedside table that James Park had brought earlier in the week. Carmen's initial shock gave way to a complex mixture of emotions that she struggled to articulate. She felt betrayed by the deception, confused about her own position within an institution her sister secretly controlled, and overwhelmed by the implications of Elena's revelation. At the same time, she began to understand Elena's perspective in ways that had been impossible when she viewed her as the family disappointment. The realization that Elena had been present during every major decision about Carmen's career, including her recent promotion, created a vertiginous sense of shifted reality. The conversation between the sisters continued for hours, covering years of hidden truth and unexamined assumptions. Elena explained her relationship with Dr. Chen, the gradual transfer of ownership, and her efforts to maintain Margaret's vision for community-focused healthcare. Carmen began to understand that Elena's apparent lack of ambition had actually masked extraordinary responsibility and achievement. The sister she had pitied for her modest lifestyle had been managing resources and making decisions that affected thousands of people while maintaining complete anonymity. Carmen's professional pride was particularly challenged by the realization that her promotion had been approved by Elena, though Elena was careful to emphasize that the decision had been based entirely on Carmen's qualifications and merit. The promotion had gone through the same rigorous review process applied to all senior appointments, with Elena recusing herself from direct involvement while ensuring the evaluation remained fair and comprehensive. Carmen's achievements were genuine and well-deserved, but the knowledge that Elena had been part of the institutional framework that recognized them created complicated feelings about her professional identity. The sisters decided together that their parents needed to learn about Elena's circumstances, though they disagreed about the timing and approach. Carmen wanted to wait until Elena was fully recovered and could handle potential family drama from a position of strength. Elena felt that maintaining the secret even longer would compound the betrayal and make eventual disclosure more difficult. They compromised on a plan that would involve telling their parents the following weekend, giving Carmen time to process the revelation while ensuring Elena didn't have to carry the burden of secrecy much longer. Elena's relationship with Carmen underwent a fundamental transformation during the days following her disclosure.
Carmen began visiting more frequently, asking thoughtful questions about hospital administration and Elena's vision for the institution's future. Their conversations evolved from superficial updates about Elena's medical recovery to substantive discussions about healthcare policy, community service, and the challenges of maintaining nonprofit missions in an increasingly corporate medical environment. For the first time in their adult lives, Carmen sought Elena's advice rather than offering unsolicited guidance about Elena's life choices. The shift in Carmen's perspective influenced her behavior in subtle but meaningful ways. She began mentioning Elena's insights during administrative meetings, though without revealing the source of her information. She advocated more strongly for emergency department resources, understanding now that Elena's requests had been based on direct knowledge rather than departmental self-interest. Carmen also started defending Elena during family conversations, pushing back against their parents' casual dismissal of Elena's career and lifestyle choices. Elena used her recovery period to develop a comprehensive plan for revealing her ownership to the rest of her family. She worked with James Park to prepare documentation that would clearly explain the legal structure of her inheritance while demonstrating the hospital's continued commitment to its nonprofit mission. Elena wanted to ensure that her family understood she hadn't deceived them for personal gain, but rather to protect Margaret's legacy and maintain institutional stability during the transition period. The physical setting for Elena's revelation to her parents was carefully chosen. She invited them to meet her in Margaret's former office, which had been preserved as a memorial to the hospital's founder. Surrounded by awards, photographs, and memorabilia that documented Margaret's decades of service, Elena felt connected to her mentor's vision and strength. The office also contained the original documents establishing the hospital's nonprofit status, providing historical context for Elena's current responsibilities. Miguel and Isabella arrived at the hospital expecting to discuss Elena's return to work and her ongoing medical care. They had been encouraged by her improved health and increased energy, interpreting these changes as signs that their family dynamics were returning to normal. Elena's request to meet in an administrative office rather than her usual patient room seemed unusual but not particularly concerning. They attributed her choice to professional curiosity about hospital operations rather than personal involvement in institutional leadership. Elena began her explanation by describing her relationship with Dr. Chen, emphasizing Margaret's role as both professional mentor and personal friend. She shared stories about their conversations regarding healthcare philosophy and community service, gradually building toward the revelation of Margaret's bequest. Elena's parents listened with growing attention, beginning to understand that Elena's connection to the hospital had been far deeper than they had realized. The foundation Elena laid prepared them for more dramatic revelations, while honoring Margaret's memory and explaining Elena's motivations. The moment when Elena revealed her ownership of St. Catherine's Medical Center was met with stunned silence from both parents. Miguel's first response was professional skepticism, questioning the legal validity of such an arrangement and wondering about potential conflicts of interest.
Isabella's reaction was more emotional, expressing hurt about Elena's deception and confusion about why Elena had felt unable to share such significant news with her family. Both parents struggled to reconcile this revelation with their perception of Elena as financially and professionally unsuccessful. Elena patiently addressed each concern her parents raised, explaining the legal structure that protected her privacy while ensuring institutional accountability. She described the administrative team that handled day-to-day operations, the board oversight that governed major decisions, and the financial management that maintained the hospital's stability. Elena's detailed knowledge of these complex systems gradually convinced her parents that she was indeed the primary stakeholder they had been told about in previous communications from hospital leadership. Miguel's reaction evolved from skepticism to professional respect as he began to understand the scope of Elena's responsibilities and achievements. His medical background allowed him to appreciate the complexity of hospital administration and the significance of maintaining a successful nonprofit institution in a competitive healthcare market. Elena's ability to discuss sophisticated financial and operational challenges demonstrated competence that contradicted her previous assessment of her professional capabilities. Isabella's response was more emotionally complex, combining pride in Elena's achievement with hurt about the deception and confusion about her own role as a mother. She questioned whether Elena's secrecy reflected a lack of trust in her family or judgment about their values and priorities. Elena acknowledged that her decision to maintain privacy had been partly motivated by fear of her family's reaction, but emphasized that her primary concern had been protecting Margaret's legacy and ensuring institutional stability during the ownership transition. The conversation with Elena's parents extended over several hours, covering not only the immediate revelation but also its implications for family relationships and Elena's future plans. Her parents gradually began to understand that Elena's apparent lack of ambition had actually concealed extraordinary achievement and responsibility. The modest lifestyle they had criticized reflected Elena's commitment to directing resources toward patient care and community service rather than personal consumption. Elena's explanation of her near-death experience during Carmen's celebration created profound emotional impact for both parents. The realization that they had been toasting Carmen's success while Elena fought for her life in the same building challenged their understanding of priorities and family loyalty. Miguel acknowledged that his focus on professional achievement had blinded him to Elena's actual accomplishments, while Isabella recognized that her emphasis on social status had prevented her from seeing Elena's genuine contributions to their community. The family's processing of Elena's revelation unfolded over several days, with individual conversations supplementing their group discussion. Carmen served as an intermediary, helping their parents understand aspects of Elena's situation that were difficult to accept initially. Her medical expertise and recent promotion gave her credibility that aided the family's adjustment to their new understanding of Elena's circumstances. Carmen's support was particularly valuable in helping their parents recognize that Elena's achievements were genuine rather than simply inherited wealth. Elena's return to work was delayed while she navigated the complex process of integrating her public and private roles at the hospital. Staff members who had known her only as an emergency physician gradually learned about her ownership, creating adjustments in workplace relationships that required careful management. Elena worked with human resources and administrative leadership to ensure that her dual role didn't create inappropriate dynamics or conflicts of interest that might compromise patient care or employee welfare. The revelation of Elena's ownership prompted broader discussions about the hospital's future direction and her long-term vision for the institution. Elena began participating more openly in strategic planning processes, bringing her emergency medicine perspective to conversations about resource allocation and service priorities. Her experience as both physician and patient informed her understanding of areas where the hospital could improve its care delivery while maintaining its commitment to serving all community members regardless of their ability to pay. Elena's family relationships underwent fundamental changes as they adjusted to understanding her actual circumstances and achievements. Miguel began seeking Elena's advice on professional matters, recognizing her expertise in healthcare administration and nonprofit management. Isabella started including Elena in family financial discussions, acknowledging her sophisticated understanding of investment and resource management. Carmen developed a collaborative relationship with Elena that balanced their professional interactions with genuine sisterly affection and mutual respect. The Rodriguez family's public relationships also shifted as word spread about Elena's ownership of St. Catherine's Medical Center. Colleagues who had previously viewed Elena as an unremarkable emergency physician began recognizing her significant contributions to healthcare policy and community service. Social acquaintances who had dismissed Elena's career choices started seeking her opinions on medical matters and community issues. The family's social standing was enhanced by association with Elena's achievement rather than diminished by her apparent lack of success. Elena's integration of her public and private roles created opportunities for advancing Margaret's vision in ways that had been impossible while maintaining complete secrecy. She began speaking publicly about healthcare access and community service, using her platform to advocate for underserved populations. Elena's emergency medicine background provided credibility for her advocacy work, while her ownership of a successful hospital demonstrated the feasibility of maintaining nonprofit healthcare in competitive markets. The anniversary of Elena's heart attack became an opportunity for family reflection and gratitude rather than a painful reminder of near tragedy. The Rodriguez family gathered at St. Catherine's Medical Center to celebrate Elena's recovery and acknowledge the growth in their relationships that had resulted from her medical crisis. Carmen used the occasion to publicly thank Elena for her support and mentorship, while their parents expressed appreciation for Elena's dedication to community service and family healing.
Elena's romantic life also underwent significant changes as she began dating Dr. Marcus Williams, a colleague in the emergency department who had been part of the team that saved her life during her heart attack. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual professional respect and shared commitment to emergency medicine. Marcus's knowledge of Elena's medical crisis and recovery process created intimacy that was both professional and personal, while his understanding of her ownership responsibilities demonstrated maturity that impressed Elena's family. The hospital's board of directors formally acknowledged Elena's leadership during a ceremony marking the second anniversary of Margaret's death.
Elena spoke about continuing Margaret's mission while adapting to contemporary healthcare challenges, emphasizing the importance of maintaining community focus while ensuring financial sustainability. The event celebrated both Margaret's legacy and Elena's stewardship, recognizing the successful transition that had preserved the institution's nonprofit mission. Elena's relationship with her family continued evolving as they developed deeper understanding of her perspectives and priorities. Family dinners became opportunities for substantive conversations about healthcare policy, community service, and social responsibility, rather than superficial discussions about status and achievement. Elena's parents began volunteering with hospital programs, contributing their professional skills to initiatives that supported Elena's vision for community engagement. The success of Elena's leadership was demonstrated through measurable improvements in hospital operations and patient satisfaction scores. Staff retention rates increased as Elena implemented policies that supported physician wellness and professional development. Patient outcomes improved through investments in technology and training that Elena had prioritized based on her emergency medicine experience. The hospital's financial stability strengthened through careful resource management that maintained service quality while controlling costs. Elena's story became an inspiration for other healthcare professionals who were struggling to balance personal fulfillment with professional expectations. She began mentoring young physicians who were considering non-traditional career paths, encouraging them to pursue their passions while maintaining commitment to patient care and community service. Elena's example demonstrated that success could be defined by impact and service rather than solely by traditional markers of professional achievement. The Rodriguez family's transformation was recognized by their community as an example of how medical crises could strengthen family bonds rather than divide them. Elena's near-death experience had forced all family members to examine their priorities and relationships, leading to greater authenticity and mutual support. Their story illustrated the potential for growth and healing even in families with long-standing patterns of conflict and misunderstanding. Elena's vision for St. Catherine's Medical Center included expanding mental health services and developing programs to address physician burnout, initiatives that were informed by her own experience with stress-related health problems. She worked with colleagues to create support systems that would prevent other healthcare workers from experiencing the isolation and pressure that had contributed to her heart attack. These programs became models for other institutions seeking to improve physician wellness and retention. The legal structure of Elena's ownership was eventually modified to include family members in advisory roles, creating opportunities for Miguel, Isabella, and Carmen to contribute their expertise to hospital governance while maintaining Elena's primary decision-making authority. This arrangement satisfied the family's desire for involvement while preserving the institutional independence that Margaret had valued. The collaborative approach strengthened both family relationships and hospital leadership. Elena's public speaking about healthcare access and community service led to invitations to serve on regional healthcare planning committees and nonprofit boards. Her unique perspective as both physician and hospital owner provided valuable insights for policy discussions about healthcare delivery and financing. Using these platforms, she advocated for maintaining community hospitals and supporting nonprofit healthcare missions in increasingly corporate medical environments. The anniversary of Margaret's death became an annual celebration of community service and healthcare accessibility, honoring both Margaret's vision and Elena's continued leadership. The event raised funds for programs serving uninsured and underinsured patients, while recognizing healthcare workers who demonstrated exceptional commitment to community service. Elena's family participated actively in these celebrations, demonstrating their support for her work and their understanding of its importance.
Elena's relationship with Marcus deepened into engagement and eventual marriage, with their wedding ceremony taking place in the hospital's memorial garden that Elena had created to honor Margaret's memory. The event symbolized the integration of Elena's personal and professional lives, celebrating love and commitment within the context of service and community. Elena's family welcomed Marcus warmly, recognizing his genuine care for Elena and his shared commitment to emergency medicine. The final transformation in Elena's story involved her decision to establish a foundation that would support community hospitals and nonprofit healthcare initiatives throughout the region. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation carried forward Margaret's vision while expanding its scope to address contemporary healthcare challenges. Elena's family served on the foundation's board, contributing their professional expertise to its mission while supporting Elena's leadership and vision. Elena's journey from family disappointment to respected healthcare leader demonstrated the potential for personal growth and family healing even in the most challenging circumstances. Her near-death experience had catalyzed changes that might never have occurred without such dramatic intervention, forcing all family members to examine their assumptions and priorities. The story illustrated how medical crises could become opportunities for transformation rather than simply sources of trauma and fear. The Rodriguez family's evolution continued beyond Elena's initial recovery and revelation, with ongoing growth in their understanding and appreciation of each other's contributions and perspectives. Elena's leadership of St. Catherine's Medical Center provided a foundation for family pride and community service that enhanced all their lives while honoring Margaret's memory and vision. Their story became a testament to the power of truth, forgiveness, and shared commitment to values that transcended individual achievement and status. Elena's legacy was ultimately defined not by her ownership of St. Catherine's Medical Center, but by her dedication to improving healthcare access and supporting community wellness. Her family's support for this mission created a lasting foundation for their relationships while contributing to their community's health and prosperity. The transformation that began with Elena's heart attack continued through decades of service, healing, and growth that honored both Margaret's vision and the Rodriguez family's capacity for love and change. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.